Well, at this point in time, hey, welcome back everyone. We're going to try something new here. I'm going to do a painting of this dude here. And I'm not actually going to do a painting at this point in time, and I'm not going to use a fine soft glazing tool. What I am going to do is use this new brush here, which is pretty cool. And just pick a color to start off with at random. Could be anywhere, usually somewhere mid-tone kind of gray. And what I've been doing lately is just kind of making this brush big and just making the background so that it's not just one white blank canvas. So you want to have it so that it's got a little bit of texture and color in it already, just so that it's easy on the eye and kind of messes it up. I used to do this a number of different ways. I would sometimes just take my flat brush here, make it really big, fade it down a bit, and just put some streaks over across the background like this, and then some up and down streaks too to kind of crisscross it out. Give it a little bit of background texture in different ways. Make it dark, darken up the corners a bit, and the edges and stuff like that. Give it a bit of randomness so that it's not just... It's got some character already. Before you even start, the picture begins to have some kind of character and feeling already. Then we're going to get a really dark color. And I'm not going to copy this directly. I'm just going to use this as a rough idea and get where this guy is head. So if his head was here, and I'm going to make this a bit darker now and do this just kind of, or even use that other brush there too, right? If his head was here, it would be like that, and his shoulders down here, and goes down his arm, and then his body cuts in at an angle, copying this angle here, you see, and then down there like that to his waist thing. And this may not look anything like him at this point in time, but I'm just trying to get some shapes and color on the canvas. Add some color here, actual color, and just fade this in back here with some really big colors. And the background kind of has a fade out on the bottom, and I'm going to mimic that and mimic some of this stuff by just putting some things like that. That's going to center this area here with some light, and I'm picking an orangey color for my background, a little bit red. And this is where the light part's going to be here. This will be the focal point of the picture. This brush is kind of cool because it kind of changes the color and changes the lightness and darkness of it as it goes, just to give it a bit of an organic feel to it. And I can take that, and there's like this thing here adds a canvas texture to it. So it does the same thing. If you zoom in on this here, you can see how it just adds some canvas texture, makes it look like a canvas. Very cool. You pick the color and it puts color in there with that canvas. So this is like what happens if you're just preparing a canvas and you put some rough colors down, and you're not really painting anything. You're just kind of getting where your general shapes are going to be, right? And his hair is going to stick out here, and his face is going to be in here. So it looks nicer with the kind of more random colors of this thing here. He's going to have some facial part here. His nose goes there. And again, we're not copying this picture. Well, we are, but we're not copying it. We're sort of using it as a guideline to try out some new brushes and experiment a bit like that with what might look good on a canvas. So some color going up around this guy here. This is some of the brushes I've been using lately. They kind of have a nice little fade effect, and you can do some different things with this. Plus there's blenders too. Like if I use this other blender here, I can make it look more brushy. I can make it bigger too. And it'll take the colors that are there and it'll streak them, and it'll blend them like it's a type of brush. Give it a bit of effect. And this thing works pressure sensitive as well as directionally sensitive too. So you'll see a lot of painters will start this way. They'll kind of fill in an area with some dark color, like let's say like a raw umber or something like that, right? Or else a burnt umber. And they'll fill in a canvas with that color and use like a bristle brush, right? Just when they're starting off a painting, they're going to use this big thick brush and just scrub some paint in there, right? They don't really care what it looks like. They just want to get get shapes and colors in. So his shoulder's going to be dark like that, and he's going to get a bit lighter over here where his chest is and things like that. follow the line along there. And then with that kind of brush, with that kind of thing that they're doing there, I've already forgot what I was going to say, so this is why I need to practice this shit, you know what I'm saying? This is exactly the reason why I need to practice this shite, man. Plus I don't really like the way that's looking anymore, so let's go back to this other color here. They'll put down a base color like this, right, a really dark color, and then they'll actually scrub out. They'll use like a rag, a wet rag, and they'll scrub out the shapes that they want where the light hits it. That's just sort of their starting point to get the general shapes in so that they're not copying exactly and you end up getting your own feel to this. So here's the shape. It's kind of his outline, right? The wall, though, is back here underneath his arm. We'll make it a bit lighter so we don't forget that it's there. And this is the dark part. We'll get the bristle brush, we'll get that flat oils again. Make it not too bright. Make it nice size. And we'll just sort of make it more of a standardized color. We can define the shape a little bit too, right? We can cut his shoulder in here a bit, his bicep, like that. And underneath here, it's about that brightness. It's actually quite dark. You think it's light because it's underneath, but it's actually that dark if you look at the original photograph, and his part's almost black is what they've done. But we're starting out with a lighter color tone, so we're not looking quite as frightening as that. Like, stark as that at first, right? Let's save all our stark pictures for, like, those dark boys are all going to die. There, we get some darkness going here. There's an arm, and we can see a shoulder. A little bit of light hits the shoulder over here, so we're going to add just a little bit of light just to kind of remind us that there's going to be light there. Just light. Doesn't have to be too much. And that color there is kind of interesting. It comes across his chest here a little bit too. If it's too dark, I just pick a little bit lighter. I fade it. I brush really lightly, and then pick that other color. It's a bit lighter. That's not quite light enough. Then it gets a bit lighter here, and then it gets really light on the other side, where his chest is over here. It gets quite light, and it goes right up into his shoulder, where it's just the dark on the edge, but the rest is all quite light. So it's really light here, and it's dark just along that edge by his chin. So we're just kind of getting our general areas in here like this. And the light hits down his abdomen here. And they would scrub this out. So they would take actually like an eraser, let's say, if I had an eraser tool, which I do. But I don't have to because it's digital, right? And I made this like really big, and I faded it out quite a bit, so I was only just like lightly scrubbing it. They would do it like that and get lights in that way, but I don't like doing that because every time I use my brush, I'm practicing using my brushes. This is actually light. The value of this is 199, it's over here, and this is actually darker. So this is actually lighter. In the real final result, this part of his chest is going to be lighter than the background, if we want our painting to have that kind of a scheme. So I could go like that, raise that value up a bit, and put in some light. But then it's just too scary at first, so we're just going to like fade it in slowly. And again, by fading this in slowly, I'm doing two things. One, I'm creating my own painting. I'm not copying the photograph exactly. I'm using my own idea for colors, my own, I'm using it as a guide to show me where the light would hit, and it becomes my own thing in the end, right? Maybe there's too much, and I can add different amount, like you could add a spotlight, it's kind of cool. It's a spotlight, like he's got some like faded light hitting his body at certain things, like he's being through the trees or something like that. That's like about a nice color. Like we're gonna lighten this up a little bit over here, and just bring to that one there. And we're bringing the shape, so we're shaping the chest over there. And by adding the other thing I'm doing here, by doing what I'm doing right now, adding in different colors, I'm going to darken this just a little bit, is I'm also kind of slowly modeling, and you see a lot of different brush strokes in here, and that makes this look more, again, organic and real, like a painting rather than a digital painting where you're copying something exactly. This could be maybe not even a regular guy. So if he's got an angle more extreme on his face than my guy's going to have, my guy's already looking a little more generic, unfortunately, so I might actually adjust that. And the way I'm going to do that is take this brush here, make it really tiny, and I'll do it like, use it like a pencil line. If this is the line I'm going here, I want that same angle. I want an angle like that. Doesn't matter that I paint over this, because what I'm going to do is, that's almost straight across. What I'm going to do with this later is I'm going to paint over it anyway. And again, just because I paint over something like this is a really beautiful looking area in here, it's all faded and nice and very organic, I can make that happen again. And the reason why I can make that happen again is because I practice. And if you practice, you're going to get better. There's this mohawk. This looks terrible, but anyway, whatever. I can paint over that. I just need a rough outline to remember where it's going to be. He's got a bit of light in here, but not much. At the top. And then it gets quite dark for the other parts back here. This brush is going to, if I go really lightly, barely touch it, it'll actually leave a line like that and then get bigger. So a lot of the brushes work like that. The brush I really like to use, they have this thing called a real round brush. It's quite nice. It's just a round brush, but what it does is it reacts really well to the pen that I'm using. I can't show you in the video, you'll have to show you outside the video. If I just lightly go, it does almost nothing. If I press really hard, it does almost nothing. But if I lightly lay it in there, it's almost like I'm laying paint on there. And then I can get some nice looks like that. And it'll give a nice faded edge to the brush work. This guy's got a lot of light in there, so I'm going to take this light here too and do the same thing. I'm going to make this default. I use a lot of the default brushes because I don't like to waste my time messing around with the equipment. I want to paint. The same as when I'm playing guitar or anything like that. You know, I just want to be able to have fun and do the things I want to do without having to worry about making my microphone work right or making the streaming video right. I just want to plug in and play, you know. He's got light over there under his thing there. The background goes there around his face. This goes right almost towards the edge of his shoulder. So I've got that wrong, because this guy's quite skinny. So I gotta move his whole head over here somehow, right? Maybe that's not the right thing to do. But here I am moving everything over now, right? And it's still a painting, and it's still a legitimate painting. It still works in a way. It's just going to be a little bit different now. Here's going to be over here. Now I've lost that beautiful fade effect, but I will try and get it again just to see if I can by fading in this background here like this. That's better. We got a little bit of a highlight in here where his bald head is. And this becomes an interesting look all of its own too. So I'm going to go back here to my real round, my flat oil in there, which is used for a lot of, it's one of my go-to tools, this flat brush, because I can do a lot of stuff with it. I can make it big, I can fade it, I can make the feature bigger, which kind of moves the bristles apart, and I can get like kind of edges like that, and edge things out a bit, or I can just do the default, which is looks kind of solid, but when you zoom in on it, you realize it's not. It actually still has a lot of brush stroke. It's good for doing hair and stuff like that. So I can do that kind of thing as well. Okay, I haven't started this actually as a live stream yet. So. But here we get some interesting looks already from this. And you wonder, like, what is this guy and what does he do? Because he could be anything. So it could be an alien or just like some creepy human. If I pick this color here, it's actually quite light and pink, and that's not going to work for my thing. If the colors aren't quite right, he's got a line coming there, a little bit up there. I don't like it at that 80%. I like it more like about 50 or 60% like the other there's a default flat brush that I always forget to use. It's just opaque flat, and it starts at 63%. So it's already like a little more naturally forgiving that way. This gets you kind of a picture of what can be happening as we go. And I'm going to just see, and you only have a little bit hint of this stuff over here. You can just tap that in a little bit. This is how you can tell this is a lot more like real painting than regular digital painting. You can just do a lot of fussing about with things, which A lot of digital people are they have hard, fast rules, right? You do this, you set up an outline around an area, and then you like make this even more fadey, so it really kind of blends those colors in, like I'm really painting a light color of oil over top of another color of oil. Like a layer that's like not as, it won't make it quite as dark. And then it's kind of fading out as a bit as I go down towards his hip bone and stuff like that. Just like in here it is. And he's got this other little spot that goes down here like this. And in here it's not so black. It's black right in that middle part there. So we're just going to lightly fade over here and bring this dark up here like that. And over in his shoulder here, he's got kind of almost a reddish tone, which matches the background a bit. Now I've moved that head over, so I might have to move the shoulder over a bit. Or I might not. His chest is here, his arms are almost about right. Chest is here to the arm, chest is here to the arm. So here's the shoulder cuts in about here, actually. And because this fades into the dark, we can leave a faded edge here that doesn't have to be all solid like it might normally be. And the background gets dark as it gets to the bottom like this. Again, there's ways of doing this with layers and things like that, but I like to paint over top of it because every time you do this, of course, you're practicing your art. There's an arm over there. That's a nice color for that. And I'll just paint a dark outline. It comes in from up here. This comes in from the chest. It's a nice smooth angle like that. Quite. And I can make this a thin line. And now this is starting to look good enough that I think I'd better save it because it's kind of cool and it might end up looking good. Of course, it might end up looking like shite too, but we'll find out. We'll call it Dark Dude because I don't have a better name for it. And this is a good time for me to start saving because if I've thought, wow, it's looking really cool, and then I forgot to save it, and then the computer crashes because this recording software is something I've never used before, it's kind of fucked up, then I'll be like, oh no. Okay, the chest pops out a bit right into the background there, and the background cuts in like that from his shoulder to the chest. Cuts in like that, cuts in like that. Use little place markers on the body to kind of remind me where I am sometime. Now there's background here and it makes his arm stand out, and I can undo that with this. Is the beauty of this, right? But I don't... Sometimes you can do that to make an arm or something stand out. You just kind of go over it like that. It's a painter trick. Works in illustration and graphic art, but it works in painting too. You don't always have to do it accurately like what you're seeing. You want to be able to stand like I want his. Right now the high contrast area is here. It's very light and that's very dark. So what you end up by getting there is that's where your eye is going to get drawn to. It's very much going to get drawn there. You're not going to see all this other stuff. It's almost all the same color in a way, right? Even this you don't notice as much because it's the same as the background. So even though he's quite high contrast on his body here, you don't notice it as much because the part on the face really takes precedence. There's a little bit of light right in there like that. Right here. So this is how someone might work if they were working in oils. A little bit of reflection under here. Bring that in. And make him a little bit skinnier and leaner too, because this guy is quite lean. Right? So I just cut his side off a little bit there. Want it bigger again? I can add it back in. Again, when I do this with these paints like this, what it does is it lets me practice these things and say, oh yeah, how does that look? You can't do this with oil paints. With oil paints, you kind of got to have a better plan in advance, because if you start making up as you go along, and you can, but when you do that, you sometimes lose a little bit of, well, your colors get all muddy when you add more colors on. You'd have to stop and let part dry, and then you'd have to take the paint back off again. And what I'm doing here is I'm fading in the background bottom here. I can add a layer and do it this way too. I can like add some color and from the background, and it kind of just makes the bottom of the painting not stand out so much. So I go right over top of him there, and it shows him kind of fading into the background a little bit here, like that. And that gives it a bit of a more painterly look in a way too. This is a bit of a digital art trick that you'll see a lot of guys do. They'll fade out one leg or one arm and kind of make that blend into the background a bit, right? And they'll be like, oh, that's cool. So, there we go. All strokes there, but I was going to paint that out later anyway. I can use that round brush, which looks real round, looks very real. And I can change the hue a bit, not necessarily the color, and just sort of paint in some dots here and there, kind of make that really look like it's been painted over, like adding in some blobs of dabs of paint. And I think I'm actually going to have a decent painting by the end of this whole thing. This looks like fine art rather than, you know, something like you'd use for ordinary illustration. This is some kind of a fine art painting. Meaning like, hey, Ride, I don't understand what you're doing with that. I don't understand it. Does that mean that it's odd? That doesn't really sound good. That sounds shitty. I'm going to have to re-edit that part there. Ooh, this is looking good. I'll save that again because I'm liking the way it looks. So I'm going to zoom this out a bit. Again, we're running these things side by side, and this is how I've basically taken a photograph and kind of, you know, I've changed it into something that I like to paint from, right? Just like I might have painted in real life. It's a great high contrast photograph. It's like a good model. It gives a lot of feeling to that. One thing I noticed from the photo here sticking out is, I mean, there's this part of the puffy muscle here, but there's also the collarbone, right? And the collarbone's very important. So I'm going to use that round brush just because I feel like using it because I've already got it. And I'm going to fade in that collarbone. And underneath the collarbone there's a dark spot right there. Very dark right in there like that. Not fadey enough. Not fadey enough. Deep brown there like that. And a kind of a reddish tone on the top of the chest here like this. Doesn't have to be exact. We can always refine stuff later too. Like that's the other beauty of this, right? Like you can find something that looks just okay. I'm kind of working that theory where you work a darker, or you work a overall an idea, like out of focus, work it into focus, work from big loose shapes into secure details later, right? You can work like that. And just kind of a touch of light. Again, for the photograph that's perfect. But for painting we want this to stand out a bit more. I may not need this, but we add like just a touch of light back there. And as it turns out, that might be a little bit too much. So I can erase it with digital. Pick the part where it's nice and faded right at the bottom here like this. Pick that color and just lighten it up a bit. Or if that's too dark, just enough. So, and that just, actually I don't really like that much. Maybe it was just perfect like that. Maybe it was good like that. Maybe that little part can be refixed. Control Z, I went too far. I went too far. I went too far, man. And the only reason it went too far is because I went down into the area where I was doing that other fade there. I think I just really need that one little tiny bit at the top. Just like that. Why is that important? Fuck, I don't know. Time to save. Great, it's time to save again. I'm like, right now. Too hard, it looks like he's got a bone from down there. This is just a collarbone part here. Let's get a couple of spots in there, and the rest is all quite light. Now he's got this nipple. Now these are hard. See, here's the angle of the nipples here. His eyes are level, his shoulders are like this, the nipples are more of an angle. I don't know if I can do that, if I've got the guy in the right angle or not, or if I did it right. So I'm going to take a nice dark color here, Put his nipple down in the corner. And put the other one right over here and here too. This actually cuts in a little bit there on the edge, so I'm just going to cut that in like that. And make it look just so. And there's a small spot of light here, but you'll actually notice when you look closely it's not really light, it's quite dark, right? Like if I pick this color here, that's light. That's actually only half value, right? That is quite dark, even though it's lighter than the black. So if we go here, add that one little dot, just like that. And remember, we had a lightened value already, so I'm going to move that up the color like that, and add it in like that. Maybe a bit lighter for now. We can always darken it if we need to later, adjust it. Kind of scary. Time for a first break and our first test.